Will the lottery system be done in March every year?
I would love to stand here and tell you yes or no, but I don't know. Traditionally, that's when the county runs their lottery, at least for the last 4 years. That's when it's been done. But again, I think this is our first year doing this for this particular school. If we get through it and there are lessons learned that it should be later, it should be earlier, then I think we can adjust to that.
Well, that's kind of the concern, because typically people get about 90 days notice they're going to PCS in. So if you didn't get your orders till April,
right,
you didn't know you were coming here, would you be able to get in to the school system if you moved into base housing?
Yeah. So the question is, for those that are PCSing in at a later time after potentially the lottery has been run. And what we have done is we have considered that on numerous occasions and numerous conversations. And the plan right now would be to have a second lottery in the summertime if there are seats still available after the first lottery is run. So we would run the first lottery, we would see how many seats we have filled. If there are vacant seats, we would run another lottery at a point in time in the summer, which would consider folks that are moving here late.
Pat, thank you for hosting this today.
You're welcome.
Very informative. You know, we in the military are very fluid, and we depend on the ability of our folks here on the base to be able to adapt to that. We have people arriving here. This is our primary time coming up here in the spring for PCS moves. We have people coming in from all over the world to Andrews, and are they going to be able to get on this lottery, for one, and for two, in the moves that are occurring during the school year and people move out, and we're limited at 260 people, I guess. As they move out, are we going to be able to allow new people to come in as they fill into that category if they're racked and stacked, saying, okay, we got 260 people, this is what we're limited to. And as those people, those kids move out, are we going to be able to move new people in, or are we going to be limited to that rack and stack for that year, and as they PCS out, they'll just be vacant in that area?
And I'll take the second question first, and the question is a very legitimate one, in that if you go through the lottery and you're on the waiting list, and for whatever reason you don't get into school, or people move here late and they want to get on the list, and as the school year progresses, students withdraw and they move, can those families be pulled in? And the answer is yes. We always want to keep our enrollment consistent with our capacity. And traditionally what we do, even in our other schools, is as a student leaves, we would just go to the next student on the list and offer that spot to that particular student. Now they might say, you know, it's October, I'm settled in where I am, so we would just then go to the next one. To answer your first question, we've had several conversations around folks coming to the base late and after the lottery, and I think we've kind of put our heads together on a number of different ways. What's that? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Colonel Reiser will address that.
Yeah, I know what, I had the same reaction. It's like everybody PCS is in the summer and they're not going to have a chance to get in the school, is what everybody's worried about. Here is the reality, though. There are only 169 spots in that school for the 65%. And we have 252 kids within the demographic of that 65%. So the odds are, depending on what percentage of those people, you know, elect not to homeschool and come to the school, or aren't going to public school elsewhere, private school, the school very likely may be full after the first lottery. And if it's full after the first lottery, then we wouldn't be able to set aside spots anyway, because then you get into a position where someone who just shows up, they just get the keys to a house, and they get into the school, and someone who's lived here a year or two and meets the criteria doesn't get into the school because we set aside spots for people PCSing in. So it just seemed more fair to do the first lottery for the people who are here, and then assess how many spots are left, if any, and then based on that, then move the second lottery to a time with criteria that's such that we can fill those remaining spots with those people who are coming in. assuming we've already gone through the whole waiting list. It seemed like the fairest way to do it.
One thing I do want to say is the first year, ma'am, I promise you're next. You're very patient.
I have a microphone.
The first year is going to be the toughest on some folks being let down, okay? And the reason for that is because in the first year, we're talking about a temporary site. And to accommodate a school when we were approved in the fall and we've got to get a building up, we can't get this enormous building up that can house everybody. So we got to start smaller. So we're going to feel the pinch in that first year for some families. But I think for us is the permanent facility in year 2 will be much larger. And we'll know our demographic. We'll know the kinds of numbers that we're now dealing with. And we can really sort of build to suit the number of interested families at that point. So again, I'm not saying up here saying in year 2 everybody's going to get in, but what I will say is I think year 2 is a much easier year because there's a much larger facility in which to house folks, and we know who's here, and so we know the kind of facility that we have to have. So again, year 1's going to be a little bit of a, it's going to be a little bit of a tough road possibly for a few families, but we're just going to ask you to bear with us and understand this is a project that we're trying to design over the long haul, and unfortunately we've got to start small and build for a number of different reasons. Yes, ma'am.
I have a microphone. Can I, over here?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're
That's
next,
okay.
I guess.
I'm kind of out of your line of sight.
Okay.
For the school, for children that have IEPs, you practice inclusion, and you'll have teachers' aides in the classroom with some of the students that need someone if they qualify, or what is the school's policy for that?
Keep in mind now, we're a public school,
Right.
so we have to follow the same federal laws that govern all special education students, which means that we have to have a staff equipped to handle any accommodations that may be listed on a student's IEP. So if your student has speech and language, we'll have to have someone there that can provide those services to the students. We will have a special education teacher in the school building. We will have enough aides in the building that will be able to accommodate the needs of all of our special education students. I can't tell you right now what those numbers will be until I know how many students are in our school with IEPs. If we run the lottery and we have 5 students with IEPs, and we can't, well, we're not going to have this huge staff of special education students. If we run the lottery and we have a much higher percentage, then we will have to adjust the staffing. But we'll be a fully included school, and our goal is to provide an environment that's least restrictive. And if students have an IEP that cannot be accommodated in a traditional school setting, then we would go through the teaming process with those parents and try to help them and advise them on what a more proper placement would be for their children. But we cannot discriminate based on anything as a public school. So again, I can stand up here and assure you that we deal with students, and you know, Mr. Hill again just got done running a school, and so he's very familiar with addressing IEPs, having team meetings, having to meet all the federal guidelines for special education students. Ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. That was one of my questions. I appreciate that. For clarity, for those military families that are serving in other branches, Army and Navy per se, but they are required to use the medical facilities here on Andrews because they live so close to the base. You know, where do those families fall under the 65 versus 30? I was a bit confused. I don't understand.
I'll let Colonel Reiser again address that question. Thanks.
If they have orders to Andrews, regardless of service, so if they work over at Naval Air Facility Washington, or if they work with the Marine Corps unit here or the Army unit here, any of those organizations that are actually headquartered here at Andrews, and they've got orders here, and they live on the base, then their children, if they're military, are eligible for the 65% lottery. If you're stationed in Navy Yard and you live here, if you live here, you're given all... Okay, yeah, whether you live on the base, stationed at the Navy Yard, or off the base in Prince George's County, you have all the rights and privileges of a Prince Georgian. So you can then apply for those, the 35%. Okay? Now, if you live in Virginia, even if you have orders to Andrews, then you're not eligible for the school.
Yes, ma'am.
What if the orders are to like White House Comm, but you live on Andrews? That's a slightly different situation than being stationed at, like, say, Fort Belvoir and living here.
There are probably lots of questions like that regarding certain organizations. If the organization is headquartered here and your orders are to Andrews, then you qualify. Okay? But if you work, I mean, we have lots of people who live on the base who are assigned to organizations throughout the National Capital Region. They're not actually assigned to Andrews. In that case, if they live within Prince George's County and they are not assigned to the base with orders, then they're eligible for that 35%.